Hey, Matt here. Another video. I'm gonna do some Los Angeles singer-songwriters today. I'm gonna look at the careers of Tim Buckley and Jackson Browne. I'm gonna end Jackson Browne in 1980 with the Hold On, Hold Out album. And, Tim Buckley only made records to 1974, so I'll do his whole career. What do these two guys have in common besides being pretty boys from Southern California? Nothing. I have no indication that they ever met each other. I wanted to do a Jackson Browne video and realized I was really only interested in his career in the 70s. So that's only 6 albums. And it just, unless I really went into detail about each song, that wasn't enough for a video. So I was going to do one on Tim Buckley anyway, so I just decided to combine the two of them. So I'm going to start with Tim since he was the first to make it. If you get this complete album collection of Tim Buckley, you get everything but his last 2 albums. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's 7 of his albums, and then there's a works in progress CD. So 8 CDs in total. So they're all in stereo, so you don't get the mono mixes of the first 2 albums, but that's okay. All right, so I did my 1966 video the other day, and I showed you guys the Tim Buckley CD here. He was a teenager when he was 19 years old when this album came out. So he's fresh out of high school the previous year. He's working with his high school buddy Larry Beckett. Beckett was helping him write the lyrics, and it's really a great, to me, it's a phenomenal album for 1966. He never really made it in the 60s, but he never really made it, period. But he was known. I mean, people knew who he was. He had a phenomenal voice. He had, matinee idol looks. His songs at the time on this LP and on the next one were still, as I mentioned in my videos for 66 and 67, they were still conventional enough to be considered just classic kind of, folk rock singer-songwritery stuff. He really wasn't getting too avant-garde at the time, and both of these records, form fine entryways into his discography. Okay, so I like most everything on here, and he followed this up with 67 with Goodbye and Hello, which I have said in my 1967 video. This is my favorite one. It's not a perfect album. I mean, it's got some filler on it. I really can't read these things. Oh well. It's got good, not Goodbye, and Goodbye and Hello is the title track, and it's that's 8 minutes. It's on side 2, and it's got a lot of Beckett's more poetic lyrics. What is it called? Morning Glory, the last song with the hobo that Blood, Sweat, and Tears did. That's a great song. Hallucinations is a great kind of folk psych song on side 1. So yeah, these two are Tim Buckley at his most accessible, and these would be what I would give the newbie interested in Jeff Buckley's dad. All right, okay. I often pair Tim Buckley albums up. Those first 2. Here's the next 2 from 1969, Happy Sad, and then later on that year we had Blue Afternoon. These are the last 2 albums that he would make in a more or less, straightforward, conventional singer-songwriter manner before he really began to get out there and become avant-garde. The jazzy qualities are already seeping in here. These albums are not as easy to listen to as the 2 I just showed you, but they're easier to listen to than the next 2, right? So I still say that the 4 albums he made in the 60s are the most listener-friendly. Happy Sad is great. He was probably at his peak of his popularity here, but none of his albums, I don't believe, ever made the top 50 as far as I know. Can I read the titles? No, I can't, but that's all right. Okay, and then Blue Afternoon. Another good one. This was made at the same time as Lorca. Now, I had heard, I read a book about Tim from his guitar player, and that book said that Lorca was finished before Blue Afternoon. They were recorded about the same time, but that Blue Afternoon was released first. When I looked this stuff up online, I couldn't find any mention of that. So Lorca comes out in 1970. It is not an easy listen, but it's not as out there as Star Sailor. Again, I'm combining, you know, these two. Lorca and Star Sailor both came out in 1970. They're difficult works, but rewarding. Lorca a bit less challenging than Star Sailor. And again, finished about the same time or before, depending upon whom you believe, Blue Afternoon. Okay? But Star Sailor is the one that Tim felt was his masterpiece. It is the one that a lot of his fans think of as his masterpiece. It is the one that his guitar player, whose name escapes me, otherwise I would tell you, who wrote the book, thought was his masterpiece. He's with Zappa's Straight label, right? Oh, yeah, Straight, subsidiary of Warner Brothers. Anyways, this did not sell. He was still trying to perform this stuff live, like over a year later. The audiences really weren't digging it. He had begun to lose popularity. He seemed to be like at his peak in terms of sales and his public, you know, presence after Goodbye and Hello. But he was stubborn. He didn't want to go in that direction. He didn't want to be the pretty boy singer-songwriter, kind of like what Jackson Browne would become, right? Not that Jackson Browne would ever consider himself that either, but Tim really, that repelled him. He wanted to do stuff like this. Unfortunately, his audience, or at least most of them, were not going to follow him down this path. All right? I enjoy the album, but I rarely play it. All right? Star Sailor. So basically, from what I can remember from that book, his record label said, shape up or ship out, you know, start making more commercial music or go find another label. So he did. 1972, Greetings from LA, the last well-known or even classic album, depending upon your point of view. Tim Buckley would ever do. This is where he thinks he's Marvin Gaye, you know, singing sex music. This is, you know, again, can I see the title? Yeah. Move with Me, Get on Top, Sweet Surrender, Devil Eyes. You know, it's and the music sounds like that. You know, it's Tim trying to be as sexy as he can. Now, I don't know if he was taking this seriously. I think he was. Or he was just maybe rebelling against the label, saying, okay, you want commercialized music? This is what I'm going to give you. But he believed in it, and a lot of his fans like it. I enjoy it. This is the last solid album that he made. No, it's not as good as Let's Get It On, for Christ's sakes, but what is in terms of that kind of sexy music. Later on, like in the 80s, Prince would take this stuff to like new levels. But, you know, Greetings from LA is a solid album, and it's un-Buckley-like, but enjoyable. And the last two, which do not come in this box, I'll get to right now, are his weakest ones. Sophronia, however you say that, is okay. I don't really have a decision whether I like this better than his last album or not. Dolphins, you know, Fred Neil and Peanut Man, okay. Martha is the Tom Waits song, that's a good one. Quicksand, and then he does a version of Sally Girl on the Roses. It's Buckley coasting. It's Buckley, you know, probably, I don't know, disillusioned with the business, just putting out product. Then that's 73. Then there's Look at the Fool from 74. Not too much, if any, better. Boy, looking at these songs, which I can read. Tijuana Moon, yeah, remember that one? Freeway Blues. Who Could Deny? Yeah, Mexican Voodoo. Wandaloo, that's right. I don't really think this is that great of an album either. I don't know if it's any better or any worse than Sophronia, but since I never played these last two Tim Buckley albums, they hardly matter. He died of a heroin overdose, I think, in a motel down here. But he was, I call him a Los Angeles, you know, but he was really from Orange County, and he played the clubs down there, and that's where he kind of, you know, made his name. He did the song to a Siren on a Monkees episode during the Monkees' second season. Mickey Dolenz brought him on, but that version of Song to a Siren doesn't sound like the one that's on Star Sailor. And that is it for Tim Buckley, the short and sweet career of Tim Buckley. Moving on now to Jackson Browne. Jackson Browne was another brown-haired, but this time straight brown hair, singer-songwriter who was around in the 60s. I mean, people recorded his songs. On Nico's first album, she records one of his tunes, or was it two? The Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, the Byrds did Jamaica Say You Will, and other artists too. But when he first did his first album, Jackson Browne, and it's called Jackson Browne, even though some people like to call it such before using it, it's called Jackson Browne. When he did his first album in '72, again, he had been a known presence for a long time. I remember David Crosby talking this guy up to Rolling Stone a couple of years before this album came out. So this is a classic, I think. Again, it has the before mentioned Jamaica Say You Will. Song for Adam is a great song about a guy he actually knew who possibly committed suicide in the 60s. Doctor My Eyes was his big hit. Unfortunately, Tim Buckley never had a big hit. From Silver Lake, like I said, he's a Los Angelino. Rocking on the Water was a hit on the radio. I used to hear that growing up. It's a great record. Almost as good as For Every Man, right? This has his version of Take It Easy, which he co-wrote with Glenn Frey. They didn't really sit down together and write it. It's a Jackson Browne song, which Glenn Frey then finished off and made it that sing-along, Take It Easy. So after Jackson Browne heard him sing it that way, Jackson began to sing it like that. Anyway, his version of Take It Easy is on here. Redneck Friend is, I read that he wrote that for Greg Allman, but when I tried to look that up online, I couldn't find it. They were buddies at the time. His version of These Days is on here, which Greg Allman sings on his solo album from this year, Laid Back. That version is pretty damn near definitive. That's the one that Nico covered too, I think, on her first album. For Every Man, the riposte to Wooden Ships. So yeah, this album is almost as strong as the first one. But the first time he made an LP, which some people would consider a masterpiece, was Late for the Sky in 1974. This is the Steve Hoffman DCC. I'll be buried with this one. This one sounds great. You don't usually get Jackson Browne albums on audiophile discs, so this one and The Pretender are outstanding. Another great, it's almost like a concept album of his life at that time. He's ending a relationship. At the beginning of the album, he finds another relationship at the end of this album. He would later marry this woman. There are no hits on here. Fountain of Sorrow, I've heard other artists do that. Road in the Sky, I've heard that on the radio. For Dancers, great. It's another song about a person who killed themselves. Walking Slow, Before the Deluge, I used to hear that on the radio too. So perhaps Jackson's first classic, but I love the first two as well. All right. He was one of those guys whose popularity went up with each record. The Pretender was an even bigger hit. This, again, is the Steve Hoffman DCC disc. These are albums I had on vinyl, growing up. The whole thing's classic. Linda Paloma, Here Come Those Tears Again was a hit. The Only Child, Daddy's Tune. The Pretender, I used to hear that all the time on the radio. So I don't know if he was a big deal across the rest of this country or internationally, but you certainly heard him in the 70s on San Diego radio stations, and I assume here in LA too. So The Pretender is another one of his classics. I would give this to a Jackson Browne newbie. But perhaps his most famous, successful, whatever you want to call it, album is Running on Empty. All right? This is a live album, but it's not all in concert. It's recorded in a hotel room or on a bus, whatever. The whole thing is great. I mean, again, can I read that? Barely. Running on Empty, of course, is a classic. That was a hit. Rosie, his little masturbation song. The Road. You Love the Thunder. Heard that one on the radio a lot. And then, of course, at the end, The Loadout and Stay. That was a radio. Those two songs were radio staples. It is the most accessible, easiest to listen to Jackson Browne album. And it's great, the way all of his albums from the 70s are great. This is 1977. All right? And I'm going to end with 1980s, his only #1 album, Hold Out. Every Jackson Browne album, I think, sold better than the previous one. and this is when he hit his apex. So it's good enough just to end here. Unfortunately, it's not a great album though. It's got some good songs, including the hits That Girl Could Sing and Boulevard, which were all over early 80s rock radio. But I think in terms of just consistency, this is his worst album thus far. In 82, he contributed that hit song to the Fast Times at Ridgemont High soundtrack. God, not That Girl Could Sing, but Somebody's Baby. Why wasn't it come to me? So when he finally released another album in 83, it was Lawyers in Love. I felt that was kind of disappointing too. So I'm going to end with this one, Hold Out. So two great singer-songwriters from the past. One, Browne, I think more well-known than Buckley, but Buckley perhaps more hip in hipster circles than Jackson Browne. Jackson Browne kind of, with his association with, I don't know, the Eagles, maybe, might not have the hipster credentials, but he was also a good friend of Warren Zevon, and Zevon's a hip guy. So, Jackson kind of got shafted in that. Plus, his rep may have been besmirched with Daryl Hannah's tales of beating her up, whoever you believe or not. Joni Mitchell seems to dislike Jackson Browne too, but everybody else thinks he's a nice guy. Tim Buckley was probably all but forgotten until Jeff Buckley became famous in the 90s, and then Jeff Buckley was taken from us too soon, and so now both of them are just kind of names from the past. Jeff might consider to have the ultimate version of Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah. I'll do a Leonard Cohen show too. I need to do more singer-songwriters because they impress me every bit as much as great musicians, because it's all about the song. So anyway, two Los Angeles singer-songwriters, Tim Buckley and Jackson Browne, both favorites of mine. Matt signing off.